Leftists actually have a few things right about Margaret Sanger, the co-founder of Planned Parenthood. Milo recently compared Planned Parenthood's president to Hitler. Ooh, so edgy.
President since 2006, Cecile Richards. Richards is well on her way to personally matching Hitler's body count. That's a swastika by the Planned Parenthood logo, in case you know. Cecile Richards has presided over 3 million abortions, or 3 mega scrapes, in her 10 years as president of the organization. This has earned her half-Holocaust status. Full Holocaust seems eminently reachable.
And more.
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was unarguably and hideously racist. She spoke glowingly about a presentation she gave to a group of KKK women in New Jersey, and they loved her messaging about the black race so much that they asked her to come back. Messaging like this, which she wrote in a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble. She said, "We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out the idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members." Margaret Sanger's goal, of course, was to diminish the black race, and one can argue she was at least partially successful.
Okay, so much misinfo here. This lie that Sanger wanted to exterminate blacks is pushed by politically motivated cucks trying to appeal to blacks to get them to be against abortion. The quote Milo reads is highly misleading, and he probably doesn't even know it. It's taken from a 1939 letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble, not from a KKK rally. Listen to the full context, because the way this quote has been misrepresented is very dirty. It seems to me, from my experience where I have been in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas, that while the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they can get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. They do not do this with the white people. And if we can train the Negro doctor at the clinic, he can go among them with enthusiasm and with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people. His work, in my opinion, should be entirely with the Negro profession and the nurses, hospital, social workers, as well as the county's white doctors. His success will depend upon his personality and his training by us. The minister's work is also important, and also he should be trained, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of the more rebellious members. A related memo written by Dr. Gamble in 1939 clarifies the point. There is great danger that we, the Negro Project, will fail because the Negroes think it's a plan for extermination. Hence, let's appear to let the colored run it. Conservatives will say, see, she's talking to a eugenicist about keeping it quiet because she really did want to exterminate blacks. But the statement in the full context has the exact opposite meaning. Birth control clinics that opened in the 1930s were for white women. The black community actually welcomed Sanger's birth control agenda in the 1930s. Webb Du Bois, or Du Bois as he preferred, publicly supported birth control and worked with Sanger to push for it. He even served on the board of a clinic that Sanger opened in Harlem and criticized the birth control movement because of its failure to address black people's needs. This is what started the sinister-sounding Negro Project that neocons refer to. It wasn't a plan to exterminate blacks, but to give them what they were asking for. Sanger helped open clinics in the South, staffed by blacks to teach other blacks about contraception. In 1939, she launched the Negro Project, which included black leaders like Du Bois, Walter White, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, who were all half white, by the way.
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was unarguably and hideously racist. She said, "We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population."
Sanger's correspondence shows this sentence advocates for black doctors and ministers to play leadership roles in the Negro Project to avoid misunderstandings. In this era, blacks were highly superstitious and untrusting, so Sanger and company wanted to ease their fears about contraception and education. It wasn't a trap so they could secretly sterilize blacks. It's just ridiculous. In fact, it was first Webb Du Bois who said, "The mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, still breed carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit and least able to rear children possibly."
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was unarguably and hideously racist.
Who does his fact-checking? This couldn't be further from the truth. Sanger was an anti-racist and a feminist. She began her campaign for birth control as a feminist, not a eugenicist.
There was a certain satisfaction in doing something that was going to alleviate the sufferings of women in particular, and I was quite a feminist at the time.
Obviously.
And yes, and I naturally didn't want to see women take all the suffering of childbearing and of pregnancies.
Margaret didn't think race was the problem, but uncontrolled, unplanned fertility among all peoples. She wanted all women to avoid unwanted pregnancies.
You have helped to spread the birth control movement not only here in the United States, but in Europe and the Orient as well. Why? Why is birth control of such vital importance internationally? Is it just to save women suffering? Is that the only reason in your mind?
Well, not entirely. The population question is a great concern today, and the rate at which the births come in to we're saving them now. At one time, when children died, they didn't have the food. Today, our population all over the world is getting certainly better consideration and better conditions than they had at the time that I was there. I went to every country because I was invited. And I didn't go into the country myself. I was invited to go to Japan and to speak there, have 8 lectures on the question of birth control and peace. I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
What events, what emotions in your life made Margaret Sanger a crusader for birth control?
Well, Mr. Wallace, it's hard to say that any one thing has made one do this or that. I think from the very beginning, I came of a large family. My mother died young, 11 children. That made an impression on me as a child. I was a trained nurse, went among the people. I saw women who asked to have some means whereby they wouldn't have to have another pregnancy too early after the last child, the last abortion, which many of them had. I was what I would call a born humanitarian. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see cruelty, even to this day. And in nursing, you see a great deal of cruelty and unnecessary suffering.
Yes, Sanger became a eugenicist, but so was the majority of intellectuals and elites in this era, not just Europeans. There's a massive need to define eugenics, as people immediately think it means Nazis gassing non-whites. Well, German National Socialists lived in an all-white society. They didn't have non-whites mass migrating to their country like today. The idea of eugenics is older than Adolf. Eugenics means conscious procreation and being realistic when it comes to mentally retarded, crippled, or insane people having children, where if they do, it begins a cycle of needless suffering. But it also means encouraging the best and brightest of your people to have children. It's a fact that people who are poor and low IQ tend to have more children. Eugenics is about ending the cycle of suffering. It is based on compassion. Today we have incentives for the least capable people to have children. Look around, it's becoming idiocracy and suffering is everywhere. Anyone who calls Sanger a racist hasn't read her work or interviews. She was more anti-white than anything. In an interview with Earl Conrad from the Chicago Defender in 1945. Discrimination is a worldwide thing. It has to be opposed everywhere. That is why I feel the Negro's plight here is linked with that of the oppressed around the globe. The big answer, as I see it, is the education of the white man. The white man is the problem. It is the same as with the Nazis. We must change the white attitudes. That is where it lies. Sounds just like today's liberal. Sanger herself wrote in 1939 that she had joined the anti-Nazi committee. She was right in line with the hardcore, anti-white, anti-nationalist Frankfurt School of Thought. I've spoken about this in the video White Girls, Black Dolls. Go listen to it.
Margaret Sanger's goal, of course, was to diminish the black race, and one can argue she was at least partially successful.
Complete nonsense. She pushed birth control education on white women.
Mrs. Margaret Slee, president of America's Planned Parenthood Federation, maintains that European women should stop having babies for the next 10 years.
Don't you think such a theory, such a radical theory, is antisocial?
On the contrary, it seems to me that it is more practical and humane. But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies in starving countries for the next 10 years.
She pushed birth control education on white women, even the KKK, and black women also wanted in on it. She worked with blacks and was against segregation. Further, Planned Parenthood didn't even begin doing abortions until the 1970s. She was dead at this point. And the pill, that wasn't even invented until the 50s by a Jewish guy and a Chinese guy.
Stats about abortion by race are not always easy to find, because of course they're not. But nonetheless, they paint a compelling picture about the race reality of abortion. New York City presents itself as a strong case study. In 2012, there were more black children aborted in New York City than there were black children born alive. Blacks accounted for 42% of the abortions in the city, while Hispanic women accounted for another 31%. That's 73%. Other national data for the Center for Bioethical Reform assert that black women are 3 times more likely to have an abortion than white women.
Well, you can't blame Margaret Sanger or white people for that. Yes, blacks are 13% of the population of America, but account for 36% of abortions. Yes, black women are 5 times more likely to abort than whites. 69% of pregnancies among blacks are unintended, only 40% among whites. Black teens are 3 times more likely to get knocked up than whites. Their infant mortality rate is more than twice that of whites. And blacks make up 71% of gonorrhea cases, half of all chlamydia, AIDS, and syphilis. Sounds to me that Webb Du Bois was looking out for the interests of his people by asking Sanger to help educate about contraception and sexual health. None of these things are the fault of white people. Planned Parenthood isn't just doing abortions. They provide STD treatment, give PAPs, and provide health screening. And to get graphic, Planned Parenthood is helping cure blacks of penile and vaginal infections. White people are the ones funding these services. Black women are free to choose. No one's forcing them to abort their baby. And if they do have a baby, there's a generous welfare system in place for them. In fact, it has enabled millions of black lives to sustain themselves. In reality, today it's the white birth rate that is of great concern. Because of aid from Western nations, the African population has exploded. So don't even try and act like this is a holocaust against black babies. Do you know where the highest abortion rates in the world are? Eastern Europe, white countries, especially Russia. China is also very high. The CDC shows that fewer than 1 in 10 abortion providers are located in majority black neighborhoods.
So isn't it fascinating that intersectional third-wave feminists fighting for abortion are so often seen arm in arm with Black Lives Matter? To any BLM members tucked away in the audience, I can conclusively say that feminists are the one group who do not believe that Black Lives Matter at all.
This is cuck 2.0 rhetoric. Yeah, because feminists love white men. They fight for white lives all day long. This is retarded. Feminists are all about blacks, Muslims, non-white invaders, and everyone but Europeans. And they aren't fans of having children either. To say feminists are anti-black is a pitiful way to defend the cuck 2.0 stance that Dems are the real racists. We all know Dems hate white people, and cucks have no issue with becoming a white minority as long as that majority values liberty and guns, because we're all the same. So basically, no one looks after the interests of white people. And few mention the Jewish women who surrounded Margaret Sanger. Yet no Jews get charged with wanting to exterminate blacks. All we hear is Sanger, Sanger, Hitler, Hitler. Jewish women were well tied into the birth control movement. 14 years before Sanger was Emma Goldman, who later got behind her. Goldman and her husband published a 4-page pamphlet, Why and How the Poor Should Not Have Many Children. They said fewer and better children would create a healthier human race. The National Council of Jewish Women pioneered the establishment of birth control clinics in the 20s and 30s. Female Jewish doctors directed birth control clinics throughout the country. Lena Levine helped Sanger found Planned Parenthood in 1948. Jewish women served as directors and staff at the Margaret Sanger Bureau. 2 of Sanger's primary assistants, Anna Lifshitz and Fania Meindel, were Jewish immigrants. Hannah Stone was the first medical director of the Margaret Sanger Research Bureau. The Yiddish press provided news of the birth control movement and of Sanger's court battles. There were many more Jewish figures. Although they espoused the same rhetoric, they're never accused of trying to exterminate blacks. Oh, and Lorraine Rothman was a co-inventor of the Del-M abortion device before legal abortion. Today, Jewish orgs are huge supporters of abortion, and numerous Jewish doctors are willing to perform it. Yet no one says they're trying to exterminate blacks. So it's interesting that in Israel, you have to stand in front of the Pregnancy Termination Committee before you can have a legal abortion. The fact is, today many smart, beautiful women are also having abortions. That is not eugenic, it's dysgenic. But to me and to the alt-right, abortion isn't the biggest issue. Protecting the white people who are alive and ensuring they have a country of their own is. The majority of the planet is not white. We are a minority, and we need our own countries.